what I learned was the inspiration for The Foundling. Having said that, The Foundling is a work of fiction. All characters and events are products of my imagination. I want to add that this novel contains language and attitudes about race, sexuality, and intellectual disabilities that were prevalent in early 20th century America, but are certainly offensive by today's standards. The words feeble-minded, moron, imbecile, and idiot were clinical terms at that time. They were used by doctors and psychologists to classify a substantial percentage of the population deemed mentally and/or morally unfit. An example of how these words were used can be found in the following quote. It was written by another celebrated feminist, a champion of women's reproductive rights, and also, like many other progressives of her era, an avid eugenicist. Every feeble-minded girl or woman of the hereditary type, especially of the moron class, should be segregated during the reproductive period. Otherwise, she is almost certain to bear imbecile children who in turn are just as certain to breed other defectives. Margaret Sanger, The Pivot of Civilization, 1922. Thank you for listening to The Foundling. Ann Leary, October 2021. Part 1. 1. I've been told that my mother had a wonderful sense of humor. Also that she was pretty. But most people recall her wit first, and her easy laughter. And because of this, I've always had a better sense of how she felt than how she looked. She must have been happy most of the time if she found so many funny things to say and to laugh about. She died when I was an infant, so I have no memory of her. After I moved to my Aunt Kate's house, I'd hear her talking with friends about my mother and me, usually in hushed tones after I'd just left the room. She's a somber little thing, somebody would say. Or, she's so shy, she certainly hasn't Louisa's high spirits. That was my mother, Louisa. Apparently, there was a sparkle in her eye. My Uncle Teddy said this about her once, and when I asked him where the sparkle was, what part of the eye, he laughed and gave me a wink. When I asked him again, he told me to shut my trap. I didn't inherit my mother's high spirits or her sparkly eye, but she did leave me a very nice lady's suitcase. It had been a wedding gift from a wealthy, distant cousin. I never saw it until the day Father came for me at St. Catherine's Orphan Asylum. He gave Mother Beatrice no notice, just showed up one afternoon in the summer of 1922, when I was 12. He arrived in a borrowed black Packard, and when he strode out to the courtyard where my friends and I were playing, he called out, "Which one of you is Mary?" At least 5 of us raised our hands. It was a Catholic orphanage, after all. But I felt, as he smiled vaguely at each of us in turn, like he'd reached inside me and crushed my heart with his hand. I hadn't seen him in almost a year, but I recognized him instantly. I'd grown a bit. I think that's why he didn't know me at first. "What about Edel, or Trudy?" he said. "We called our girl Trudy when she was a baby, Trudy Engel." I was too thrilled to remain hurt. As soon as I stepped forward, he said, "Well, there you are," and pulled me close. I felt the strange smoothness of his freshly shaved jaw during the brief moment when he pressed his face against my forehead. He used to have rough whiskers when Uncle Teddy took me to visit him up at the lumber mill. He told me to pack my clothes. He was moving me in with Aunt Kate. The laughter and taunts from some of the older girls when he reminded them of my original name were like blanks fired from a pistol. They were like the loud pop, pop, pop from a clown's dummy pistol in the circus that came to Scranton every summer. The circus had a free night for foundlings and other unfortunates. We all screamed and clung to one another when we were little and heard that clown's gun the first time.